Brand names carry a lot of weight, especially in that of the guitar community. I own Fender and Gibson guitars because I trust those brand names. But sometimes a brand name can do a lot of the heavy lifting for a product that ultimately lets you down. This is Gear Profile. Hello, my name is Marc Gallagher and welcome to Gear Profile, where I take a look at a piece of gear that I have and love and I tell its story, why it speaks to me, and of course, give it a little play. Today we're looking at my Marshall DSL 15C valve amp, an amp that I got hoping for the Marshall flavour, but it ended up gaslighting my palate. In 2024, as I started getting more interested in guitar, I wanted to be something of a session guy who could record parts from home. For this, I knew I needed small valve amps, ones that could start to crunch without getting too loud. I had the Vox AC10, the Fender Blues Jr. I just needed something Marshall-y to satisfy the main guitar amp food groups. I was considering the Origin series of Marshall amps, but considering my stacked layout of amps, I needed something with a front-facing control panel so that my Vox could stack on top of it. For this reason, I ended up going with the Marshall DSL 15C, a 2-channel 15-watt combo amp that crucially had valves and reverb. I got this amp from a seller in London. Yes, this was the same day in which I bought my Taylor 1140E and my Vox AC10, and I played a corporate Hawaiian themed gig. It was a busy day indeed. I tried the amp out through the seller's Jazzmaster and then I took it on its merry way. The seller included the cover and the original box with all the stuffing and the manual and all those trimmings. The amp lives in my studio. I believe I've only ever taken it out of the house for servicing and for one band rehearsal. Otherwise, it remains here, where I rotate which guitar and amp I use to practice and noodle about with on guitar. This is a Marshall DSL 15C, the dual super lead 15-watt combo. The DSL range comes in various wattages, such as the DSL 40CR, in which both channels have different switching options between them. It's like a 4-channel amp almost. This one is just a straight up clean or classic gain channel, and then also the overdrive or the ultra gain one. Each channel has volume and gain, and then there's a global 4-band EQ which includes presence, and then also a couple of buttons, deep for a bass boost and tone shift for a mid scoop. It also has a digital reverb whose sound I quite enjoy. On the back there is a switch for pentode versus triode, which alternates between 15 watt and 7.5 watts. All that goes into a 12-inch Celestian speaker. There's also a foot switch included that's not just for the channels but also the reverb. I found that reverb switch quite pointless because I'm always going to want it on. At no point am I ever going to go, right now I want absolutely no reverb, no sense of space, no life to the bloody guitar sound. Like, amps are just better with reverb, especially. For this part of the video, I didn't necessarily want to just describe how it sounds. I wanted to kind of demonstrate a few things on this amplifier just to doubly confirm not only my thoughts but also show you how it sounds. Normally my pedal board lives directly in front of the amplifier, so I had to move that a little bit. I've got my always on pedals in the form of a compressor, EQ, short delay and tremolo. Those are always on, and that's what I sound like right now on my Telecaster bridge pickup. So the first channel is called Classic Gain, which functionally speaking is basically a clean channel, although you can make it crumble a little bit depending on how much you throw into it. So for example, I've got my pickups in series, so it's like a humbucker, and on full volume that sounds like. So you can get a fair bit out of that. If I was to exaggerate the gain on the clean channel, then that might be. So it's mainly clean, although you can really push it, especially when you have it in triode mode, which is the 7.5 watt mode. I find that for this amp, the best way to usually treat it is to run it, you know, a bit hot. Here I've got the gain on about 1 o'clock, the volume on about 2, and that really helps the amp to like open up somewhat, and that's where you still get some really fun crunching. Next thing I want to really talk about is the second channel, the overdrive, because in my opinion, it sounds a bit like ass. I find this channel sounds very, very fizzy and a bit too gainy. Obviously, they've called it ultra gain, and it's just, it loses so much bottom end, and it's just really fizzy. Even with the gain knob, like barely anything, it's still way too fizzy for me. Humbucker mode. Because the delay is going into the front of the distorted amp, I'm going to just turn the delay off. No, it's just way too fizzy. And again, that's with the gain at barely anything. Obviously, if I was to, you know, fiddle with this a bit more, and I really don't want to, it's going to sound like this. What I want you to do now is just listen to the bottom end as I go from this channel to the classic gain channel. Like, the ultra gain channel just loses all the bottom end, so it just sounds really thin and fizzy. It's not a fun experience. Additionally, I have had issues with feedback on the amp where the valves themselves like kind of become microphonic, and that can be a real pain and not the most like fun experience to play through. Hope you get my point. Here's a fun little anecdote. Once I went to PMT in Manchester, may that shop rest in peace, and there was a guy trying out the larger version of this amp. It was the DSL 40C, or maybe even the CR. And when he was trying it out, I told him, hey, I've got the 15, just to warn you, the overdrive channel is a bit crap on this. And he went to one of the overdrive channels, and actually, that was pretty alright. And basically, on the larger version of this amp, the DSL 40, basically, it's got 4 channels. So the classic gain has 2 kind of like mini channels therein, and then the ultra gain channel has 2 mini channels therein. Once you got to the high gain channel of the ultra gain, what happened was we got that really shit fizzy tone, and we're like, that's it. So that's basically what we have in the ultra gain. It is just taking like the really high gain element from that Marshall, but annoyingly it just, you lose all that like bottom end, so your tone is just incredibly thin. Last thing I'll do before we move on is just show you a drive pedal versus the amp's drive. So let's go through the classic gain channel, but I'm just going to stick on the Wampa Paisley channel 1. And now let's go through the ultra gain Marshall. you just have more mids, and it's just nicer. So now that we've established that the ultra gain channel is a bit crap on this amplifier, I just want to show you some of the other things that apply globally to the amp. So firstly, let's look at a couple of the buttons. We've got the deep button, which is basically a bass boost. Here it is without. I wonder what happens if I have the deep switch in, but then I put it on this ultra gain channel. The results are probably not going to be great, but let's just see. So on the clean channel, it can be nice to have, especially if you're going at low volumes, but also it is a bit boomy relative to just having the bass up. Like, the deep switch is nice, but you have to really compensate for it by having the bass right down, which I think is a bit pointless, because it can otherwise get really boomy and, like, flubby and not quite satisfactory. It's not quite warm. It's a bit over-exaggerated for what it's trying to do. The next button we have is the tone shift, which I believe is a mid-cut. Let's see what it is. Let's stick on the one Platumnus Deluxe. So yes, that is a mid scoop, but it's not like quite as exaggerated as other mid scoops I have. For example, on my Fender Stage 160 DSP, that's a bit more of a satisfactory kind of mid scoop where it's done with the idea of like heavy metal in mind. But this one feels really light in comparison, and I feel like it doesn't really do much but just make your overdrive sound a bit worse. I don't know, I'm just not quite getting much fun out of that. Outside of the buttons, we've got the global reverb. It's a digital reverb, but honestly, I still really like how it sounds. Obviously, I kind of like to just have it a bit of an always-on thing. When I want more effecty reverbs, I've got a pedal for that. Next thing you've got is the presence knob, which is a function of the power stage. So this is going like after these, basically. And it can add some really nice little bite to it. And then beyond that, you've got the 3-band EQ. So I'm just going to kind of explore it briefly in terms of addressing the problems of this amp. So it's a bit too mellow, so let's try and push up the treble a bit in the way that the presence isn't quite doing. Slightly better. Here's the mid knob. You know, some like EQ knobs will have like a lot of dB plus or minus on the signal there. The mid knob here is really not doing a lot. It's very small and very subtle, and unfortunately, that means I spend a lot of time being like, well, it's not really doing much of anything. But overall, in terms of its sound, it can be a bit boxy. It's, of the 4 amps that I have in this room, this one is like 3rd or 4th place. It's a bit boxy and doesn't quite have the same like bark and snarl as some of my other amplifiers, like the Vox AC10 that sits just above it. As a quick little experiment, here's just a quick sound sample from each of my 3 valve amps, as I would normally set them with just an SM57 in the middle of the speaker cone on each. Hopefully that will kind of show you the main character of these amps and why the Marshall kind of falls short. So when it comes to this amp, it stands as a firm 3rd place, possibly even 4th behind the Fender solid state amp that I've got down here. The Marshall's one I plan to replace, I'm just not sure with what. It's a case of finding an alv amp with reverb that's small enough to fit on this rather packed space here, it's a bit tight fitting, and it also has to have a front facing panel so I can stack the Vox on top of it. Maybe I could just get an external speaker cab so the Vox has a different flavour, so like something with a 12-inch speaker instead of the 10-inch that's on board in the Vox, so I could maybe just get a cab like that. Or maybe I just don't put anything in its place and I let the Vox stay on the floor. I have heard great things about the Marshall DSL 40CR, and that larger headroom really captures the Marshall thing better than that of the 15C. But realistically, it is too big and too loud to be practical for this kind of space, considering that there are neighbours' bedrooms either side of these walls. Because I record at home, I use small amps that are 10 to 15 watts. It appears that you can't really capture the proper Marshall sound in such a small package. I just learned that the hard way. My name is Marc Gallagher and this has been Gear Profile. Thank you for watching and let me know if you have any thoughts down in the comments. You can also follow me on your favourite social media at Marc Gallagher Music. And do consider subscribing to me on Patreon, also at Marc Gallagher Music, Marc with a C. For now, I'm Marc Gallagher. Like the video if you want, share if you feel compelled to, and follow me on places. I'll catch you down the road.